young scholar's discovery could rewrite the history of Middle-earth. In the quiet archives of Gondor, Elara found a cryptic map tucked inside an ancient text. It hinted at entire kingdoms hidden deep beneath the world she knew. Her decision to follow its clues risks everything she has built, her reputation, and even her safety. By the end of this journey, you will uncover the stunning truth behind these lost realms and the forgotten lineages that shaped them from the shadows. What ancient secrets lie buried under the mountains we think we know, and what happens when a single curious soul dares to unearth them. I would love to know where you are joining this story from and what the local time is for you right now. What do you believe is waiting in the world's unexplored corners? Elara's lamp cast long, dancing shadows across the parchment as the final rune surrendered its meaning. The path did not lead to a forgotten city or a treasure vault, but to a door, a sealed entrance high in the misty mountains, a place so treacherous most travelers gave it a wide berth. This was no longer a theoretical puzzle, it was a destination. With a steadying breath, she began to pack, her movements quiet and deliberate in the silent archive. Securing passage required all her savings and a convincing story for a wary caravan master named Boren, a man with deep-set eyes who asked no questions but clearly had many. He agreed to take her as far as the high pass and no further. Her departure, however, did not go unnoticed. Conservative members of the scholarly council, men who believed some histories were better left buried, dispatched their own agents with a simple directive. Bring her back, quietly. The journey into the mountains was a trial in itself. Each step away from the white city of Minas, Tirith, felt like a step away from her entire life. The wind howled accusations, and the sheer drops on either side of the narrow path mirrored the precipice of her career. Was she abandoning her duties for a fool's errand? Were the council's warnings about awakening sleeping powers actually wise counsel she had been too proud to hear? These doubts were a constant companion, louder than the crunch of gravel underfoot. Yet, every time her resolve wavered, she would touch the folded map inside her coat. It was not about pride or discovery for its own sake. It was about a truth that had been deliberately hidden, a lineage erased. She chose to trust the evidence, the quiet voice of the past, over the fearful whispers of the present. The stakes escalated with the altitude. Boren and his caravan turned back at the snow line, leaving her with a final, grim nod. She was alone, and she was not. Glancing back, she caught a glimpse of movement far below, dark cloaks against the gray stone. The council's agents were closing in. Pushing forward with a new, frantic energy, Elara scrambled up a crumbling rock face to a ledge that matched the map's description, and then the mountain itself seemed to reject her. With a deafening roar, the ledge behind her gave way, tons of rock and ice crashing down into the chasm. The sound echoed for what felt like an eternity. When the dust settled, the path was gone. She was utterly isolated, cut off from both her guides and her pursuers. Before her, where the landslide had scraped the mountain clean, stood a vast, seamless stone door, older than any kingdom of men. And covering its surface was a script no living soul had read in an age. The stone door was a seamless puzzle, its surface covered in carvings of interlocking roots and ancient stars. Elara traced the grooves with her fingers, feeling the faint thrum of old power. This was not a lock to be picked, but a melody to be played with touch. Each symbol seemed to correspond to a celestial event, a pattern she had seen in the Gondor archives. She pressed a sequence, her heart pounding with each deliberate movement, starting with the root of a forgotten tree, then the star that crowned the winter solstice. A low, grinding hum answered her, and a section of the door slid inward, revealing a stairway that spiraled down into absolute blackness. The victory was short-lived. The grinding noise echoed through the mountain pass, and from a nearby cavern emerged a hulking shape, a cave troll whose milky eyes fixed on the new opening. Its guttural roar shook dust from the ceiling. Confrontation was impossible. Her mind raced, weighing the need for speed against the risk of the door sealing shut again or collapsing entirely. She remembered the small pouch of flash powder in her pack, a scholar's tool for illuminating dark corners. As the troll lumbered toward her, she hurled the pouch at the stone floor before it. A blinding white flash and a sharp crack filled the air. The beast recoiled, bellowing in confusion and pain, its light-sensitive eyes overwhelmed. Elara did not wait, slipping through the narrow opening and onto the top step. She pressed a hand against the inner wall, and the door obediently slid shut, sealing her in silence and cutting off the troll's enraged cries. She was safe, for the moment, but her most versatile tool was gone, and the message was clear. These depths were not simply abandoned, they were protected. The air in the stairwell was still and cool, carrying the scent of dry stone and immense age. Her lamp revealed walls that were no longer rough-hewn rock. Carved into the stone was a magnificent mural, its colors faded, but its story starkly clear. It depicted a city of breathtaking beauty, built not under the sun, but within a colossal cavern, illuminated by glowing crystals. Elegant figures with features both graceful and strong moved through peaceful streets. This was no crude refuge. It was a fallen kingdom, a civilization that had once thrived in splendor beneath the world. Who were these people, and what catastrophe could have erased such glory from all memory? The mural unfolded like a silent epic along the cavern wall, its faded pigments telling a story of a lost golden age. Elara moved slowly, her lamp illuminating scenes of a majestic dwarf king with a crown of intertwined stone and starlight. He was no mere chieftain. His lineage was marked by a unique symbol, a hammer crossed with a crescent moon, a sigil she had never seen in any record of Durin's folk. This was a separate line, a forgotten royalty. Her hand flew across her own parchment, sketching the symbols and regalia. These were not the marks of a refugee clan, but of a sovereign nation. What had happened to this under-king, and why was his very existence scrubbed from the histories of both dwarves and men? Her light then fell upon a more sobering sight, a jumble of ancient bones slumped against the wall. A tattered leather journal lay near the skeletal fingers. Her breath caught. She was not the first to find this path. Crouching, she carefully opened the brittle pages. The script was an old dialect of Westron, speaking of a grand quest for the Heartstone, a legendary gem said to be the source of the kingdom's power. But the entries grew frantic, scrawled with warnings of a sleeping curse laid by the last under-king to protect his legacy. The final words were a chilling confession. The silence has a voice. It hums, it watches. I can no longer tell if I am the seeker or the prey. Fear, cold and sharp, tightened in her chest. A curse was not some abstract legend here. It was the reason these bones lay before her. The journal named others who had sought the Heartstone, explorers and lore masters who had all vanished without a trace. Was her own curiosity nothing more than a death wish dressed in scholarly robes? Yet, the thirst for knowledge was a powerful antidote to fear. This journal was not just a warning. It was a map of failures, a record of what not to do. It held clues they had missed. The stakes of her quest had just multiplied exponentially. This was no longer about historical truth. The Heartstone, if it was real, held the potential to either restore this hidden realm to its former glory, or unleash whatever doom the Underking had sought to contain. Her decision was made with a quiet resolve. She gently lifted the journal, tucking it into her pack beside her own. The risk of inviting the curse was dwarfed by the risk of proceeding in ignorance. As she stood, a new sound reached her, faint but unmistakable. It was a low, melodic humming, echoing softly from the dark passages ahead. It was not the guttural noise of a beast. This was rhythmic, almost thoughtful. She was not alone down here, and whatever shared these depths with her was now aware of her presence. The humming resolved into a low, resonant song, as the stairwell opened into a cavern of impossible scale. A forest of crystals, each one taller than a man, rose from the floor and hung from the ceiling, all glowing with a soft, internal light that cast the entire space in an ethereal blue-green glow. The air itself seemed to vibrate, charged with a latent energy that raised the hairs on Elara's arms. Cautiously, she reached out and touched the base of one of the smaller formations. A shard, no larger than her thumb, broke off with a clear chime. It lay cool in her palm, its light steady, but as her skin warmed it, the light within the crystal flared, pulsing with a gentle rhythm that mirrored her own heartbeat. This new, amplified light did more than just brighten the cavern. It revealed what the ambient glow had kept hidden. Across the smooth surfaces of the surrounding crystals, intricate glyphs began to shimmer into view, etched deep into the stone, and now illuminated from within by her crystal's pulse. They were not the elegant murals of the stairwell. These were sharp, angular, and told a story of conflict. They depicted two factions of the underground people, once united under the Underking, now turning on each other. One group, marked by the hammer and moon, sought to protect the Heartstone. The other, their sigil a broken chain, argued for using its power to reclaim the surface world, a schism that had clearly torn the kingdom apart from within. Navigating the cavern became a delicate dance. The crystal formations were not all stable. Some groaned under their own weight, and the path forward was a labyrinth of precarious bridges and narrow ledges that sparkled with deceptive fragility. All the while, she worked to decipher the glyphs, her mind racing to piece together this tragic history. The humming, which had been a distant backdrop, grew louder, more insistent. It was no longer a single note, but a complex melody that seemed to pull at her, a siren song from the heart of the mountain. It did not feel threatening. It felt like a call. A choice lay before her. She could try to find a safer, quieter path, one that might avoid the source of the sound, or she could follow the melody. Trusting the instinct that had brought her this far, Elara chose to follow the hum. It felt less like a lure into danger, and more like an invitation, from whatever remained of this place's soul. As she moved deeper, guided by the sound, the crystals around her began to react. Their gentle glow intensified, and they started to resonate in harmony with the hum, emitting a low, thrumming vibration that she could feel in her teeth. The needle of her compass spun wildly, and the metal buckles on her pack grew warm to the touch. The environment itself was becoming sentient, aware of her intrusion and responding to her presence. The crystal path finally ended, opening abruptly into a new chamber that took her breath away. This was no geode of stark mineral beauty. It was a garden. Giant, bioluminescent fungi in hues of violet and gold carpeted the floor, their soft light illuminating a silent, underground forest. The air was thick with the scent of rich earth and something sweet, like ripening fruit. And there, standing perfectly still between two towering mushrooms, was a figure. It was cloaked in deep shadows, its form indistinct, but its head was tilted, watching her. It made no move to approach or to flee. It simply observed, a silent guardian at the threshold of whatever lay beyond. The figure remained motionless, a silhouette carved from the cavern's deep shadows. Elara took a slow step forward, her empty hands held open at her sides. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then the figure moved, not with aggression, but with a deliberate, fluid grace. A long-fingered hand emerged from the cloak, gesturing for her to follow before the figure turned and melted into the luminous fungal forest. The path they took was invisible, a route known only by memory, winding between giant mushrooms and under arches of glowing roots until the forest opened into a wide, sheltered alcove. Nestled within was a settlement of low, stone dwellings built into the cavern walls, their windows glowing with the same gentle light as the fungi. This was the village of the Stonelings, a people whose existence was a myth even among myths. They moved with a quiet purpose, their faces etched with the patience of stone, their eyes holding the deep, knowing light of the crystals. She was brought before their leader, a woman named Morwen, whose gaze was as sharp and assessing as flint. "You walk the forbidden paths, surface dweller," Morwen said, her voice a low rumble like shifting rock. "Our vigilance is all that holds the silence. Speak your purpose, or become a part of it." The accusation hung in the air. Elara knew a simple plea for knowledge would not be enough. These people were guardians, and she was an intruder. With steady hands, she opened her pack and laid the ancient journal and her own sketches on a smooth stone between them. "I am not a thief," she said, her voice clear. "I am a seeker of truths that were buried. I offer my findings, the record of those who failed before me, in exchange for your trust." Morwen studied the pages, her expression unreadable. Finally, she looked up, her eyes narrowing. "The Heartstone is not a prize for historians," she stated. "It is the keystone of this realm. Its song maintains the balance of the caverns you have walked. A single misstep, a single note of greed, and the mountain's very heart would falter. The ceilings would fall, and the light you marvel at would be extinguished forever." The weight of the revelation settled upon Elara. Her quest was no longer academic. It held the power of life and death for an entire hidden world. "Your knowledge is considerable," Morwen conceded, a flicker of respect in her stony gaze. "But knowledge is not wisdom. The path to the stone tellers, the elders who remember the old kingdoms and the true nature of the stone, is open only to those who prove their worth. You wish to learn from them, you must first listen to the mountain itself. Morwen led Elara to a cavern where the very air seemed to listen. The chamber was perfectly circular, its walls studded with stones of varying sizes and shapes, each one looking like a frozen note waiting to be sung. This is the trial of echoes, Morwen intoned. The mountain remembers the first song. You must help it remember now. The task was deceptively simple. Using a smooth, resonant rock provided by an elder, she had to strike specific stones in a sequence that would replicate the foundational harmonies of their kingdom. The first few notes came easily, a deep chime that vibrated through her bones. She matched the pattern from the journal, a sequence the previous explorer had guessed incorrectly. But fatigue was a heavy cloak on her shoulders, and her focus wavered for a single, crucial moment. Her strike was a fraction too hard, the note a jarring clang that shattered the harmony. The consequence was immediate. A section of the ceiling, no longer soothed by the correct frequencies, groaned and released a shower of rock and dust. Elara threw herself aside, but a sharp, searing pain shot through her left arm as a stone, the size of her fist, struck her shoulder. The elders watching from the entrance did not flinch. Their stern expressions were a wall of judgment, testing not just her skill, but her spirit. Gritting her teeth against the throbbing ache, she pushed herself back to her feet. Her arms screamed in protest, but to stop now was to fail completely, to become another set of bones in the dark. She closed her eyes, shutting out the pain and the judging stares, and listened. She remembered the journal's cryptic final words about the humming silence. It was not a curse of malice, but a system of balance. She adjusted her grip on the striker, her movements now gentle and precise. One by one, she found the notes, building the ancient melody not with force, but with reverence. The final chime hung in the air, a perfect, resonant tone that made the entire chamber hum in approval. The stern lines on the elders' faces softened into nods of respect. The trial was passed. As a healer tended to her arm, the eldest of the stone tellers, a man named Kale, finally spoke. "Your resilience has earned you a truth," he said, his voice like grinding tectonic plates. "But truth is a heavy burden." He confirmed her deepest suspicion. Another clan, the Broken Chain, survived in the deeper dark. They were descendants of the faction that had sought the Heartstone's power for conquest, and they were actively searching for it, believing its energy could shatter the mountain seals and allow them to storm the surface. The stakes were no longer about history or a curse. It was a race. Kale gestured for her to sit, and the other elders formed a circle around her. Then he began to speak, his words pulling the veil from a forgotten age. There was a time, before the schism, when the hammer and moon flew beside the unbroken chain. All the underrealms were united under a single king, a ruler of such wisdom that the very stones sang for him. The stone tellers' voices wove a tapestry of a time when the deep earth was not a tomb, but a cradle of three great kingdoms. Stonehaven, the kingdom of the Stonelings, was a realm of architects and crystal singers, their city, a masterpiece of luminous harmony. Deeproot, their rival, delved into the raw, untamed energies of the earth, their ambition as deep as their tunnels. And Glimmer, the smallest and wisest, served as mediators, their people attuned to the subtle flows of the mountain's lifeblood. For ages, They prospered under the rule of the last great Under-King, but his death left a void, and the Heartstone, the source of their shared power, became an object of desire and fear. Deeproot believed it was a weapon to be unleashed, a key to dominating the world above. Stonehaven saw it as a heart to be protected, a delicate engine that kept their world stable. War shattered the peace of the deep places. It was a conflict fought not with vast armies, but with seismic shifts and controlled cave-ins, each side using the mountain itself as its weapon. In a final, desperate act to prevent Deeproot from seizing the Heartstone, the last Stonehaven king performed a great ritual, hiding the gem and scattering the pathways to it, casting a veil of silence and forgetting over the entire realm. The story landed in Elara's mind with the weight of the mountain itself. The Stonelings were not just reclusive guardians, they were the last descendants of Stonehaven, sworn to protect the world from a power their ancient enemies still crave. And her map, the very thing that had called her from the quiet archives of Gondor, was likely a Deeproot fabrication, a clever lure sent to the surface to draw a curious soul who could unravel the old king's hiding spells and unknowingly reopen the path to war. Her quest for truth had been manipulated from the very beginning. The realization was a cold stone in her gut, but it hardened her resolve. "I will not be their key," she vowed, her voice firm in the hushed cavern. "My purpose is to learn, not to plunder. I stand with Stonehaven." The commitment was barely spoken when a scout slipped into the chamber, his breathing ragged. "Deeproot patrols," he reported. "They are closer than they have been in generations. They are drawn to the surface dwellers' presence." Elara's arrival had not gone unnoticed. Her journey had acted like a beacon, and the ancient enemy was now stirring in the deep dark. Morwen studied Elara, her gaze weighing the scholar's promise against the imminent danger. Then, with a decisive nod, she removed a pendant from her own neck. It was a simple, gray stone that seemed to absorb the cavern's light. "This is a shard of the Veil Stone," she said, placing the cool amulet in Elara's hand. "It will not glow for you, it will pull. It resonates with the Heartstone's hidden song. Where your mind sees only rock, your hand will feel the true path. Our survival now rests on reaching the chamber before Deeproot. Follow its call." The amulet grew warm in Elara's palm, a subtle tugging sensation guiding her through the labyrinth of stone. She moved with a new purpose, Morwen a silent, watchful shadow at her side. Each turn in the twisting tunnels felt less like a guess and more like following a current, the gray stone in her hand pulsing with a gentle, increasing warmth. With her good arm, Elara meticulously sketched their path onto a fresh piece of parchment, creating a permanent record for the Stonelings' archives, a true map to replace the deceptive one that had lured her here. But every action has an echo in the deep places. The amulet's resonant energy, a beacon for their quest, also rippled out through the mountain's hidden veins. It was a song only their enemies could hear. The ambush came in a place where the walls pressed in, a narrow gorge where two could barely walk abreast. Dark figures emerged from crevices high above, their silhouettes stark against the dim bioluminescence. Deeproot trackers, armed with jagged stone blades, dropped to the path ahead and behind, cutting off any escape. The gorge itself became a weapon, its sheer walls a trap. Morwen immediately shifted into a defensive stance, her own weapon, a heavy stone maul, held ready. Fight or flight were their only choices, and both seemed equally dire. Elara's mind, trained for puzzles, raced for a solution that brute force could not provide. Her eyes scanned the ceiling, finding a network of fragile, ancient stalactites directly above the largest group of trackers. She had one flash powder charge left, a smaller one meant for illuminating small spaces. It would not blind them, but the sharp crack and flash might be enough. Morwen, cover your eyes, she hissed, pulling the pouch from her belt. She did not throw it at the trackers, but straight up, aiming for the delicate stone icicles. The resulting crack was deafening in the confined space. A rain of sharp stone shards followed, not enough to bury their pursuers, but more than enough to create chaos and panic. Now she yelled. They broke through the disoriented line, but as Elara scrambled past a jagged wall, the amulet on its cord caught on a protruding rock. The cord snapped, and the stone itself clattered to the ground, a hairline fracture now visible across its surface. Its gentle, guiding warmth began to fade, flickering like a dying ember. The stakes of their journey had just skyrocketed. They burst from the oppressive gorge into a cavern, so immense its ceiling was lost to darkness. But the true wonder lay below. They stood at the edge of a vast, subterranean forest, where immense pale-barked trees rose towards the void, and deep within the gnarled trunks, visible through the bark like a slow, steady heartbeat, the roots pulsed with a soft, ominous light. They had reached the realm of Deeproot. The forest air hummed with a low, angry energy, each step on the soft moss feeling like a trespass. Elara and Morwen moved like ghosts between the colossal, pale trees, their bark thin as parchment, revealing the slow, rhythmic pulse of light within the roots. It was a beautiful, terrifying sight. Elara's scholarly mind fought against her fear, her eyes cataloging everything. She noted how the Deeproot clan carved their history directly into the living wood, the glyphs depicting conquest and a deep, simmering resentment for the world above. This was not a culture of mere survival, but of nurtured grievance. A sharp gesture from Morwen froze them both. Up ahead, the guttural tones of Deeproot soldiers echoed through the trunks. They were speaking of a final muster, of channeling the Heartstone's power to crack the very foundations of the mountain and flood the sunlit lands with their long-prepared armies. The threat was no longer theoretical. It was a battle plan, and their arrival had provided the final catalyst. Morwen's hand tightened on her maul, her expression a mask of grim confirmation. This was the enemy she had been raised to expect, irredeemable and single-minded in their destructive purpose. But Elara saw something else in the carved trees, a subtle counter-narrative of a people who revered the mountain's strength, however twisted that reverence had become. "We cannot fight an entire clan," Elara whispered, her voice barely audible. "But what if not all of them want this war? What if we can find someone who remembers the old songs, not just the battle chants?" Morwen shot her a look of pure disbelief. To seek a peaceful envoy among these fanatics is to offer your throat to a cave cat. It is suicide, yet the risk of doing nothing was greater. Their chance came in the form of a lone figure, a young Deeproot named Kale, who was not sharpening weapons, but carefully pruning a corrupted section of root, his touch surprisingly gentle. When they revealed themselves, he did not cry out. Instead, he looked at them with weary resignation. "You do not understand," he said, his voice soft. "Our chieftain does not lead us. He is led. an ancient spirit of the deep earth, one that remembers only the heat of the planet's core and its thirst for expansion, whispers in his ear. It feeds his anger, promising him glory while it devours his will. This was a danger far beyond a simple clan rivalry. They were not just racing against soldiers, but against a primordial entity that saw the entire surface world as fuel for its awakening. Kale, convinced their only hope was to break the chieftain free of this influence, agreed to guide them, but the path to the chieftain's hold is not open, he warned. You must cross the Chasm of Echoes, and its guardians have slept for an age. They do not listen to reason. They answer only to strength, or to a truth they cannot deny. The Chasm of Echoes was a wound in the world, a void so deep and wide that the other side was lost in shadow. Spanning it was a single bridge of ancient, seamless stone, and guarding it were two sentinels carved from the mountain's own heart. They were not golems of mere rock, but living stone, their forms shifting slowly, their eyes pits of molten light that fixed upon the intruders. Kale halted them with a raised hand. They are the bridge wardens, he whispered, his voice thick with dread. They do not judge by strength or cleverness. They test the truth within your purpose. Any lie, any hidden greed, and they will cast you into the abyss. Morwen gripped her maul, her knuckles white. This is a fool's errand, she growled. They are stone, they do not understand nuance. They will see an outsider and a traitor, and that will be the end of it. But Elara was already stepping forward, her injured arm held close, her other hand empty. The golems shifted, the grinding of their bodies like continents moving, and focused their luminous gaze upon her. She did not speak of maps or glory. She spoke of the journal in her pack, of the bones of the failed seeker, and of the Stonelings' quiet vigil. My intent is not to claim the Heartstone, she said, her voice clear and steady in the vast silence. It is to ensure no one ever can. I seek to prevent a war that would drown both our worlds in fire and stone. For a terrifying moment, the golems were motionless. Then, as one, they took a step back, their molten eyes dimming to a soft, warm glow. The path was open. Morwen stared, her suspicion warring with awe, while Kale looked on with a pained expression. To cross this bridge was to irrevocably betray his clan, to side with the ancient enemy against his own chieftain and the dark spirit that commanded him. Elara turned to them both. We cross together, or not at all, she said. Our only strength is in this alliance. Your people and mine have been separated by this chasm for generations. Let this be the first step back. Hesitantly, Morwen shouldered her weapon, and with a final, resolute nod, Kale joined them. They walked across the ancient span as a trio, and with each step, the bridge seemed to grow more solid beneath their feet, as if strengthened by their fragile unity. On the far side, the view stole their breath. Carved into the cavern wall across another, smaller chasm was the Deeproot Fortress, a terrifying marvel of architecture. Spires of sharp, black rock twisted upwards, but the entire structure was shrouded in a visible, pulsing aura of deep crimson and shadow. It was not a mere stronghold. It was a nest of corruption, and the malevolent will that dwelled within felt as heavy and suffocating as the mountain above them. There is another way, Kale murmured, his eyes fixed on the dark aura. A forgotten aqueduct, used when the mountain's waters ran differently. It will lead us directly into the lower chambers. As they slipped into the cold, knee-deep water of the stone channel, a new sound reached them, echoing down through the rock. It was the chieftain's voice, roared from the great hall above, promising his people a new age of fire and dominion. The hall reeked of ozone and ambition. Chieftain Boren stood before a throne of twisted obsidian, a living shroud of crimson shadow coiled around his form, whispering into his ear. His eyes, once his own, now burned with a borrowed fire. Elara stepped forward, her heart hammering against her ribs, and spoke not of force, but of history. She told him of Numenor, the great island kingdom of men, whose pride had drawn the very ocean down upon it. She spoke of kings who reached for power that devoured them from within. You are being led to the same precipice, she pleaded. This spirit offers you a crown, but it will only give you a grave. Boren's laughter was a harsh, cracking sound. You quote the failures of the surface dwellers to me. Their weakness is why we must rise. The shadow around him pulsed, and his guards advanced. There would be no reasoning with the chieftain, only with the corruption that owned him. They were forced to flee, scrambling back into the aqueduct as the thunder of gathering warriors echoed through the stone. In the frantic, dripping darkness, Cale's face was a mask of anguish. He had hoped for a spark of the leader he remembered, but found only a puppet. We cannot fight the entire war host, he said, his voice thick with resolve. But the chieftain does not speak for all. The clan elders, they are silenced, held in the Glimmer mirror, our sacred garden. If any memory of the old alliances remains, it will be with them. It was a desperate gamble. While Boren marshaled his forces for an assault that would shatter the mountain's peace, their only hope lay in finding a handful of forgotten old ones. They moved through the fortress underbelly, the air growing thick with the scent of damp earth and blooming night flowers. The Glimmer Mere was a pocket of profound silence, a cavern where the last uncorrupted Deeproot magic lingered like a held breath. The Glimmer Mere was a sanctuary of forgotten light. In the center of the cavern, ancient Deeproot elders, their forms frail but their eyes clear, tended to beds of flowers whose petals shimmered with captured memories. One elder, Lyra, touched a glowing bloom, and the air filled with the ghostly image of the Great Schism, the moment the shadow first coiled around their chieftain's lineage. It is a parasite, she explained, her voice like rustling leaves, a remnant of a sorcerer we thought destroyed in the ancient war. It feeds on ambition and grief, and it has made a feast of our chieftain. From a pouch at her belt, Lyra produced a single, dormant seed, no larger than a pebble. This is a memory seed, she said, placing it in Elara's hand. Planted in a place of pure power, it will grow into a light vine, a living network that can repel the shadow by reminding it of its own defeat. But it must be coaxed to life, and our time is measured in breaths. Boren's war drums are already echoing through the stone. Elara stared at the inert seed, feeling the immense weight of this fragile hope. It would need more than soil and water. It needed an energy source potent enough to trigger an instantaneous, continent-spanning growth. The Heartstone, she said, the answer coming to her with sudden, terrifying clarity. We planted at the Heartstone itself. Its power could make the vine bloom in a single moment. The elders exchanged grave looks. Lyra's hand tightened on Elara's. The stone's power is a tide, she warned. Used with a pure heart, it could cleanse this blight forever. But if the seed is planted with even a flicker of doubt, or if the shadow reaches the stone first, that same energy will become a hammer. It will not merely destroy Boren's army, it will shatter the delicate balance of every cavern, from Stonehaven to the deepest delvings, and bring the entire mountain down upon us all. The choice was a precipice. To do nothing was to allow a war. To act was to risk absolute annihilation. There was no more time for debate. With the Elder's blessing and a final, whispered instruction on the planting ritual, the trio turned and ran, their path now clear and desperate. They had to reach the Stonehaven Vault and the Heartstone before the corrupted Chieftain and his legion of shadows. Heat and pressure pressed in from all sides. The network of lava tubes they now navigated felt like the arteries of a slumbering giant, the air shimmering with volcanic breath and the constant, low thrum of geothermal vents. Elara clutched the fractured amulet, its last flickers of warmth now serving as a crude geothermal compass, warning them away from vents that would cook them alive and scouts whose loyalty was to the shadow. Each step was a gamble on the failing stone. The skirmish was sudden and brutal, erupting from a side tunnel they had no time to avoid. A Deeproot scout lunged from the gloom, his jagged blade aimed for Kale. Morwen moved with a speed that belied her solid form, shoving the younger Deeproot aside and taking the blow on her own shoulder. The sound of stone scraping against armor was sickening, and Morwen staggered back with a grunt of pain, her arm hanging useless at her side. "We cannot stop," she growled through clenched teeth, her face pale. "The mission is all that matters, leave me." Elara's heart tore in two directions. Her loyalty screamed to stay, to protect her friend, but the echoing war chants of Boren's vanguard, growing louder in the tunnels behind them, demanded she run. Kale settled the conflict. He stood over Morwen, his own simple stone blade held ready, his expression transformed from weary guide to resolute defender. "I will guard her with my life," he vowed. "My people's future depends on your success. Go." It was a trust forged in desperation. With a final, pained look, Elara helped Morwen into a sheltered niche off the main tube, promising through a tight throat that she would return. Then, with Kale standing watch, she turned and ran alone into the oppressive heat, the fate of two worlds now resting solely on her shoulders. The thunder of marching feet was a drumbeat at her back, so close she could almost feel their breath. She burst from the suffocating tube into a cavern that stole all thought of pursuit. This was the vault, a majestic dome of crystal and living stone arched overhead, so vast it could have housed a city. The air itself was alive, humming with a profound, ancient power, and at the very center, pulsing with a soft, rhythmic light that seemed to sync with the beat of her own heart, rested the Heartstone. It was not a giant jewel, but a modest, crystalline formation, no larger than a loaf of bread, yet it contained the concentrated song of the mountain. It was the source, the keystone, the very soul of the hidden kingdoms, and between her and its incalculable power stood the vault's final defense, a silent, seamless wall of interlocking crystal that shimmered with a light of its own. The Heartstone's light was a physical pressure against her skin as Elara stepped into the chamber, its hum resonating in her very bones. Kale was at her side, his face pale but determined. There was no time for reverence. Boren's enraged roars echoed from the tunnel behind them, closing fast. Elara dropped to her knees before the crystalline formation, her hands trembling only slightly as she scraped a small hollow at its base. She placed the dormant memory seed into the earth and poured the last of her water from her canteen over it, the liquid hissing as it touched the energized ground. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then a single, brilliant green shoot erupted from the soil. It unfurled with impossible speed, a living lattice of light that climbed the Heartstone itself, its leaves blooming into soft, radiant flowers that pulsed with the captured memories of a united kingdom. The light was a gentle wave, but it was potent. It pushed against the shroud of crimson shadow that preceded Boren into the chamber, causing the malevolent haze to recoil like a wounded animal. The chieftain himself staggered into the vault, his form a nexus of fury and the struggling spirit that possessed him. The chamber floor shuddered, and a web of cracks splintered across the majestic crystal dome above. The Heartstone's steady pulse became a frantic, wild strobe, its energy turning chaotic under the conflict. "You are not a conqueror," Elara shouted over the groaning mountain, her voice aimed at the man buried within the monster. "You are a guardian, like your forebears who swore oaths to the mountain itself. Remember your honor." As she spoke, Kale began a low, rhythmic chant, an ancient Deeproot litany of earth and root that their people had sung for generations before the shadow came. The familiar words seemed to confuse the spirit, its hold flickering for a critical second. The light vine responded, its tendrils of pure memory stretching toward Boren. They did not attack, but instead wrapped around him in a soft, glowing embrace. The shadow spirit contorted, its form twisting into a shrieking vortex of rage and pain as the vine's light seared it. The sound was not of this world, a deafening screech that felt like it was tearing the air itself apart. The spirit fought desperately to maintain its control, and the entire cavern screamed in protest, vast chunks of crystal beginning to rain down from the fractured ceiling. The shadow spirit tore itself from Boren's shuddering form, a vortex of pure malice that solidified into a dozen grasping tendrils of solidified night. They lashed out, not at Elara, but at the glowing Heartstone itself. Instinct took over, her fingers coated in the luminescent dust from the crumbling floor, traced patterns in the air she had only ever read about in crumbling scrolls. Ancient wards of protection, symbols meant to guard sacred places, flared to life as shimmering blue shields that intercepted the dark tendrils with a sound like shattering glass. For a moment, the assault was held, but the cost was immediate. Boren collapsed to the ground, his body withering as the spirit siphoned his very life force to fuel its rage. He was both its vessel and its fuel, and separating them now would mean his certain death. Kale stood over them both, deflecting falling shards of crystal with his own body, creating a desperate pocket of safety in the disintegrating vault. Elara's mind raced through the journal's final, frantic pages, past the warnings and the fear, to a single, cryptic line. To command a thing, you must first know its true name. The answer was not in any archive. It was in the stories the stone tellers had shared, in the oldest legends of the war that had created this schism. She remembered the name of the proud sorcerer who had first been consumed by the deep earth's rage, the one whose essence had become this parasite, Thorond. She shouted the name, not as a command, but as a statement of fact, a revelation of a long-buried truth. The effect was instantaneous and catastrophic. The spirit recoiled as if struck, its form flickering and unraveling at the edges, but the sudden release of its concentrated malice sent a shockwave directly into the Heartstone. The gem's gentle pulse became a frantic, blinding strobe, and the cavern's groaning turned into a deafening roar as the vault walls buckled inward. The light vine, sensing the climax, surged over Boren's still form and the shrieking spirit, enveloping them in a cocoon of pure, white light. Kale, seeing the ceiling begin its final collapse, grabbed Elara by the arm and hauled her backward, away from the epicenter of the blast, toward a narrow fissure in the wall that promised escape. The last thing she saw was the vine's light intensifying into a silent, all-consuming flash. Silence returned, thick and profound. The blinding white light faded, leaving behind a gentle, steady luminescence that felt like a healing breath. Where the shadow spirit had raged, only a faint, shimmering dust remained, settling like dew on the stone. At the center of it all, Boren stirred, pushing himself up from the floor. The crimson fury was gone from his eyes, replaced by a dazed, profound clarity, as if he were waking from a long and terrible nightmare. Above him, the Heartstone's pulse was no longer a frantic strobe, but a deep, resonant rhythm, and as its light washed over the chamber, the web of cracks scarring the crystal dome began to knit themselves back together with soft, grinding sounds. The mountain was healing itself. Into this newfound peace, the armies arrived. From one tunnel came the Deeproot war host, their jagged weapons held ready. From another, the Stonehaven Guard, led by a wounded but standing Morwen, their faces set in grim determination. They faced each other in the vault, centuries of hostility charging the air. For a long, tense moment, it seemed the old hatred would win. Then Boren, his voice raspy but clear, spoke. He looked not at his own warriors, but at Morwen. "The shadow is gone," he declared. "It fed on my pride and your fear. I see that now." He bowed his head, a gesture of profound humility from a chieftain who had only ever known how to command. Kale stepped forward then, his own voice ringing with a new authority as he spoke of the shared sacrifice in the vault, of the outsider who had fought for their world as if it were her own. The spears of the Deeproot warriors did not lower all at once, but one by one, their points dipped toward the floor as the story of their chieftain's redemption unfolded. Elara, her body trembling with exhaustion, saw the fragile opportunity. "We have a chance to do what the old kings could not," she said, her words carrying through the silent chamber. "Do not guard the Heartstone in secret or seek to wield it as a weapon. Steward it together. Let a new council be formed, with voices from Deeproot and Stonehaven, to ensure its power nurtures both your peoples." The proposal hung in the air, a radical rewrite of their entire history. Boren was the first to agree, his gratitude outweighing generations of suspicion. Morwen, after a long look at Elara's determined face, gave a slow, solemn nod. The agreement they forged in that moment was more than a peace treaty. It was a vow to intertwine their futures, to open the sealed tunnels for trade, and to share the long-hidden knowledge of the crystals and the roots. The war that had threatened to shatter the mountain was averted not by a victory, but by a choice. As the tension dissolved into cautious conversation, Boren and Morwen approached Elara together. Their alliance was still new, a delicate sapling, and it needed a foundation. "You, who remember the stories of both our peoples, must be the one to speak," Boren said. Morwen placed a hand on Elara's good shoulder. "Tell them of the world above and the world below, and how one curious scholar helped them remember. They were always one world. The air in the great vault still hummed, but the sound was now one of cautious hope. Elara stood before the assembled leaders of Deeproot and Stonehaven, the Heartstone's restored light casting their faces in a gentle glow. She unrolled her final sketch, the one she had drawn during their desperate flight, and laid it before them. It was not a map of conquest or hidden paths, but a unified chronicle of their intertwined histories, from the first Under King to the Schism and the recent redemption. "This is your true legacy," she said, her voice clear and carrying. "It is not a story of two peoples, but one of a single family that forgot its own name. To guard the Heartstone alone is to repeat the old fear, but to share the duty is to build a new foundation, stronger than any stone." A murmur rippled through the crowd. A grizzled Deeproot elder named Grimnir stood, his face a roadmap of old battles. "For generations, we were taught the surface was a prize to be taken, or a threat to be feared," he argued, his voice like grinding gravel. "You ask us to trust those who have only ever known the sun." Morwen rose to stand beside Elara, "And we were taught that your ambition would be our doom," she countered. "Yet here we are, both proven wrong by the same hand. The true threat was never each other, but the silence between us. The debate was tense, a final echo of the ancient conflict." But then Kale spoke, reminding them of the shared songs, the old alliances, and the practical truth that a united front could better protect their world from any future threats, whether from below or above. The promise of renewed trade, of sharing the crystal light technology with Stonehaven's architects, and the Deeproot knowledge of geothermal vents, offered a future of prosperity that isolation could never provide. One by one, the traditionalists relented, their resistance worn down not by force, but by the tangible vision of a safer, more abundant life for their children. It was then that Elara made her offer. "The surface world has forgotten you," she said. "Let me be the one to remind them. I will act as a liaison, a voice for the underrealms in the scholarly circles of Gondor and beyond. I will ensure your history is told with respect, and that any future contact is guided by understanding, not greed." The proposal was accepted, forging a role that had never existed before. This fragile alliance holds the power to rewrite every history book in Middle-earth, to reveal that the foundations of the world are shared with mighty kingdoms of stone and root. Yet for all its promise, it is a delicate creation. News of these rediscovered realms, with their vast caverns and legendary power sources, will not be met with universal welcome. There will be surface lords who see only a new frontier to claim, and scholars whose envy might twist into dangerous curiosity. As the first formal council of the United Underrealms drew to a close, Elara felt the immense weight of the trust placed upon her. Morwen pressed a smooth, dark river stone from Stonehaven into her palm, while Boren gave her a sliver of obsidian from Deeproot's heart. They were not farewells, but promises. She looked back once more at the vault, now guarded by soldiers from both clans, standing side by side, and then began the long ascent, carrying the fate of two worlds in her hands and the memory of friendships forged in the deep dark. The sun felt thin and foreign on her skin after the deep earth's embrace. Elara's return to the white city of Minas Tirith was a quiet procession, flanked by Kale and a stoic Stonehaven escort, their packs heavy not with treasure, but with scrolls of shared history and artifacts of crystal and carved root. The council agents who had once pursued her with grim intent now watched in stunned silence as she was greeted not as a renegade, but as an ambassador. Their reports to the Gondor elders spoke of confirmed wonders and a potential alliance that could reshape their understanding of the world's foundations. Yet, not every scholar in the archives welcomed this new truth. Whispers slithered through the marble halls, voices of caution arguing that some doors, once opened, could never be safely closed. They questioned the wisdom of inviting the attention of ancient powers, fearing that Elara's diplomacy was merely the prelude to an invasion from below. Undeterred by the debate she had ignited, Elara made her decision in the quiet of her old study, surrounded by the very books that had first hinted at her journey. She would not simply be a lone scholar anymore. Using her renown and the initial backing of the Gondor Council, she laid the foundations for a new guild, dedicated not to conquest, but to custodianship. Its mission was to study, understand, and protect the fragile cultures of the Underrealms, ensuring that future contact would be guided by respect. This noble goal, however, cast a long shadow. By becoming the public bridge between worlds, she made herself the primary target for every power-hungry lord and greedy treasure hunter, who now saw the hidden kingdoms not as sovereign nations, but as a new frontier ripe for exploitation. Her work held the sublime potential to unite Middle-earth in ways forgotten since the First Age, but it also placed a target squarely on her back. Unpacking the artifacts sent a tremor through the quiet air of her study. A smooth river stone from Morwen sat beside a sliver of obsidian from Boren. A scroll, penned in the alternating scripts of Deeproot and Stonehaven scribes, detailed the first joint edicts of their new council. Each object was more than a relic. It was a testament to a choice made in the heart of a crumbling mountain, a story of enmity transformed into unity through sheer will and a shared hope. The river stone and obsidian shard on her desk were more than gifts. They were a covenant, and Elara knew a promise to two kingdoms required more than one scholar's dedication. She secured patronage not from the conservative elders, but from forward-thinking nobles who saw the profound strategic and cultural value in a formal alliance with the world beneath their feet. With their support, the Guild of the Veiled Stone was born. Its first member was Kale, who chose to remain on the surface as the official Deeproot ambassador, his presence a living bridge between sun and root. They were joined by cartographers, botanists, and linguists, all united by a new kind of curiosity, one tempered by respect. Their first joint expedition was a resounding success, mapping safe, mutually agreed upon routes between the realms. The benefits flowed both ways. Surface farmers, struggling with depleted soil, were astonished to learn from Deeproot techniques for cultivating vast, nutritious fungi in total darkness, methods that revolutionized underground agriculture and increased food security for everyone. But light attracts moths, and knowledge attracts a darker kind of collector. Rival artifact hunters, envious of the guild's exclusive access, attempted to infiltrate their headquarters, hoping to steal a glowing crystal or a map to the Heartstone Vault. One midnight raid nearly succeeded, ending in a frantic struggle that left a guild hall in disarray. Though no one was seriously hurt, the attempt was a stark warning. Elara immediately ordered the construction of secure, hidden vaults, not to hoard treasure, but to protect the fragile trust she had built. Every artifact, every scroll, was a loan, a piece of someone else's soul. This philosophy became the guild's cornerstone. She implemented a strict code of ethics, a revolutionary concept in an age of acquisition. Nothing would be taken from the underrealms without explicit consent and a fair exchange of knowledge or resources. It was stewardship, not ownership. The guild's influence grew, its reputation for integrity, and its access to wonders attracting allies from Rohan and even distant Gondorian fiefdoms. Yet with every new ally came a new set of watching eyes. Spies from rival cities and jealous scholarly circles embedded themselves within the guild's ranks, not to steal artifacts by force, but to learn its secrets and perhaps find a way to bypass its strict protocols. The stakes were no longer about a single mountain, but about the balance of power across Middle-earth. During a tense council meeting, where Elara and Kale were debating how to root out these infiltrators without fostering paranoia, a breathless messenger, coated in the fine, glittering dust of the deep crystalline caverns, burst into the chamber. He carried a sealed missive, not from Stonehaven or Deeproot, but inscribed with the delicate, flowing script of a people thought to be only a myth. The message was from the mediators of Glimmerhome, and they were requesting an audience. The Glimmerhome messenger's script was a delicate tracery of silver on a ballone shell, a summons to a coast no surface map had ever charted. Their guide led them not up, but down, through winding sea caves where the salt air grew thick, and the distant roar of the ocean became a constant, thunderous hum. The tunnel opened abruptly, and the sight stole the very breath from their lungs. They stood on a shore of fine, white sand that glittered with its own inner light, lapped by a tranquil subterranean sea that stretched into an impossible horizon. The cavern ceiling was a dome of living crystal, and through its translucent skin, the filtered light of a sun they could not see painted the water in shifting hues of sapphire and emerald. This was no mere grotto. It was a world entire, a kingdom woven from sea and stone and light. Luminous jellyfish pulsed like living lanterns in the water, and schools of fish with scales like polished silver moved in perfect, silent synchrony. The Glimmerhome folk themselves were as fluid as their environment, their movements graceful, and their eyes holding the deep, patient calm of the ocean. Their leader, an elder named Selen, with hair like spun sea glass, greeted them with a gaze that felt as ancient and assessing as the tide. "You carry the dust of the upper world on your boots," she said, her voice a soft whisper that carried over the gentle lap of waves. "We have watched the fires of ambition burn on the surface and in the deep dark. We remained apart for a reason. Neutrality was our shield. Here, in archives carved into the walls of living coral, they found the missing pieces of the puzzle. The records of Glimmerhome were not written on parchment, but preserved in shifting patterns of light within crystalline spheres. Elara and Kale watched mesmerized as the story of the three under-kings unfolded. They saw that the schism was not a sudden fracture, but a slow poison of mistrust, and they learned that Glimmerhome had not merely hidden, but had acted as silent sentinels, recording everything while praying the other kingdoms would find their way back to balance. This complete history was a treasure beyond any gem, but it was housed in an ecosystem of breathtaking fragility. A single misplaced step could crush a colony of glowing polyps that took centuries to grow. The scent of foreign oils, or the vibration of heavy boots, could disrupt the spawning cycles of the luminous marine life. Selen's warning was as clear as the water around them. Your curiosity is a stone cast into our pond. The ripples could destroy what you seek to understand. The choice was stark. They could demand access, leveraging their new alliances, and risk shattering this delicate world. Or they could prove they were different from all the other seekers who had come before. Elara did not hesitate. She knelt, not in submission, but in respect, her hands open and empty. "We will not be a stone, but a gentle rain," she vowed. "Our visits will be rare, our methods will be silent. We will share with you everything we learn, and we will teach our guild to research with their eyes and their hearts, not with their hands." It was a promise to listen, not to take. Selen studied her for a long moment, then reached into the water. From the sand, she retrieved a single, perfect pearl, its surface shimmering with a soft, milky light. "This is a truth pearl," she said, placing it in Elara's palm. "It does not reveal secrets, but it reflects the heart of the one who holds it. In the presence of deception, it will cloud and darken. Use it in your dealings, ambassador. Let it guide you and others back to honest purpose." The pearl was cool and heavy, a tangible weight of responsibility. With its acceptance, the trio of kingdoms was now complete. Stonehaven with its strength, Deeproot with its fire, and Glimmerhome with its wisdom. Uniting them was a diplomatic puzzle far more complex than any door of stone. For how do you weave together cultures of crystal, root, and sea without one drowning the others? As they began the long journey back to the surface, Elara held the pearl tight, feeling its silent pulse against her skin. A new compass for the even more treacherous waters of Alliance she now had to navigate. The truth pearl felt strangely warm in Elara's palm as the emissary from Harad laid out his proposal. His words were smooth, his smile practiced, offering rich trade in spices and gold in exchange for exclusive access to the Deeproot geothermal vents. But as he spoke of progress and mutual benefit, a dark, smoky swirl began to cloud the pearl's milky surface. Elara kept her expression neutral, her gaze fixed on the gem as it revealed the deception in his heart. His true intent was not partnership, but a claim of ownership over the very lifeblood of the Underrealms. With the pearl's evidence plain for the Guild Council to see, the emissary was swiftly and publicly expelled. His trade caravan turned away at the city gates. The incident sent a ripple of alarm through the guild halls. Kale immediately ordered a review of all security protocols, insisting that future international dealings required multiple verifications and the pearl's presence at every negotiation. Yet the confrontation ignited a deeper, more volatile debate. Grimnir, the old Deeproot elder, argued passionately for sealing the tunnels once more. "Why invite vipers into our home just to prove we can handle their venom?" he thundered, his voice echoing in the council chamber. Others, however, saw a different danger in complete isolation. Morwen pointed out that a hidden kingdom is a tempting mystery, and mysteries eventually attract armies. Elara listened to the fear on both sides before offering her path forward. "We cannot hide, nor can we throw our gates wide open," she stated, her voice calm but firm. "Our strategy must be one of gradual, careful integration. We choose our allies with extreme prejudice. We share only what fosters understanding, and we never, ever reveal the locations of the Heartstone or Glimmerhome." It is a dance, not a surrender. Her compromise was accepted, but the cost was immediate visibility. The story of the Haradrim emissaries' expulsion spread like wildfire through the taverns and courts of Middle-earth. The existence of the Underrealms was now an open secret, a whispered legend confirmed. This new fame was a double-edged sword. It attracted genuine scholars and peaceful traders, but it also drew the hungry gaze of distant kings who saw untapped resources and strategic strongholds. The risk was no longer just rogue artifact hunters, but the very real possibility of a coordinated invasion by a surface power seeking to dominate the depths. In the midst of this escalating tension, a formal summons arrived, borne by a rider wearing the livery of the steward of Gondor. Elara was called to the White City's court, not as a renegade scholar, but as the foremost authority on subterranean affairs. The steward himself wished to hear her counsel, a clear sign that the fate of the hidden kingdoms was now a matter of state. The marble floor of the steward's court was cold beneath Elara's feet, a stark contrast to the warm, living stone of the Underrealms. She stood before the high seat, the eyes of Gondor's most powerful lords upon her. Unfurling her unified chronicle, she did not speak of legendary power or untold riches, but of sovereign nations with their own laws and histories. She argued for official recognition, a simple but profound act that would grant the hidden kingdoms the same diplomatic standing as Rohan or any other allied land, placing them under the protection of the White City rather than its dominion. Murmurs rippled through the assembly, a mix of intrigue and deep-seated suspicion. Lord Denuther, a senior commander with a face like weathered granite, rose to challenge her. "These are not men of Rohan," he declared, his voice cutting through the hall. "They are creatures of stone and shadow, dwelling in places meant for goblins and worse. To grant them recognition is to invite the unnatural into our very midst. How can we trust what we cannot see under the light of the sun?" The debate that followed was a delicate and dangerous dance. Other counselors, swayed by tales of the Heartstone's energy, argued for military oversight, suggesting a garrison of Gondorian soldiers to ensure this new power remained friendly. Elara felt the fragile alliance she had built beginning to crack under the weight of surface world fear. She knew that to accept soldiers would be to shatter the trust of Boren and Morwen, transforming a partnership into an occupation. Her counter-proposal was a masterstroke of political compromise. She would accept a single royal observer into the Guild of the Veiled Stone, a liaison chosen by the steward to ensure transparency and open communication. This person would witness their work, share reports with the court, but would hold no command authority. It was a concession that gave the council a window into her activities while preserving the guild's hard-won autonomy. The steward, a man of careful wisdom, saw the strategic value in her approach, recognizing that a willing ally in the depths was infinitely more valuable than a conquered enemy. His decree of official recognition was a historic turning point, setting a precedent for how Middle-earth would engage with its hidden cultures. As Elara stepped from the hushed court into the bright sun of the courtyard, the weight of the moment settled upon her. She was no longer just a scholar or an ambassador. She was the architect of a new political reality. The path ahead was fraught with peril, for every future interaction with a hidden culture would now be measured against this decision. Yet, as she looked toward the mountains, she felt a fragile thread of hope. The kingdoms of stone, root, and sea were now, for the first time, a part of the wider world story, their futures irrevocably woven together. Faramir arrived not with the fanfare of a royal envoy, but with the quiet attentiveness of a scholar. His first days with the guild were marked by observation, his questions thoughtful, and his demeanor devoid of the arrogance the Stonelings had feared. When Elara guided him on his inaugural tour of Stonehaven, he did not gawk at the luminous crystals or demand to see vaults of power. Instead, he asked Morwen about the structural integrity of their arched ceilings and the meaning behind the hammer and moon motifs in their oldest carvings. His respect was not a performance, it was genuine, and the Stonelings, masters of reading the truth in stone, slowly warmed to his presence. This foundation of trust allowed them to draft the first practical treaties, documents outlining mutual aid in times of earthquake or famine, and the exchange of engineering knowledge that would benefit both realms. Yet, within the guild's own ranks, a quiet resentment simmered. Some veteran members watched Faramir's every move with suspicion, whispering that his parchment and seals were merely the first threads of a royal leash. They feared that their hard-won independence was being slowly traded for the illusory safety of Gondor's protection. Elara recognized this fracture and made a deliberate choice. She invited Faramir into every strategic discussion, ensuring his role was one of facilitation, not command. Together, they demonstrated that his connection to the steward could expedite shipments of surface-grown grains in exchange for Stonehaven's aid in reinforcing the foundations of a Gondorian fortress, proving that cooperation could be a tangible benefit to all. Their partnership became a living model, a testament to what was possible when surface and underrealm met with open hands. This very success, however, cast a long shadow. In the taverns of Minas Tirith, rumors spread of Faramir being seduced by underground magic, while in the deepest delvings of Deeproot, traditionalists grumbled that Boren had bargained away their sovereignty for a few sacks of wheat. Extremists on both sides began to plot, seeing this fragile bridge not as a hope, but as a betrayal of their respective isolations. The tension was a low hum beneath the celebratory feast held in Stonehaven's Great Cavern, an event to mark the ratification of the new treaties. The air was filled with the resonant music of stone drums and the warm glow of crystal light, a scene of hard-won harmony. It was in this moment of triumph that Elara's eyes, scanning the familiar carvings of the hall, caught a detail that chilled her blood. There, etched into the base of a pillar near the entrance, was a small, precise symbol. It was the broken chain, the sigil of the old, vengeful Deeproot faction, the same mark that had been on the deceptive map that first lured her from Gondor. It was freshly carved, a silent, mocking promise that the past was not nearly as buried as they had hoped. The freshly carved broken chain was a cold whisper against the celebratory music. Elara's investigation began not in the archives of men, but in the oldest songs of the Stonelings. She found a single, cryptic verse mentioning the mapmakers, a reclusive order of historians sworn to the original Underkings. Their duty was not to rule, but to remember, ensuring no thread of their shared history was ever lost. Tracing their trail led her to a fissure hidden behind a waterfall of glowing algae, a place even Morwen had only known in legend. Within was a library hewn from a single geode, its walls a mosaic of amethyst and citrine, and every surface was covered in meticulously drawn maps, and genealogical scrolls. The air smelled of dried herbs and profound solitude. Here, she met the Order's ancient leader, an elf named Loremaster Idril, whose eyes held the weight of millennia. Idril confirmed Elara's deepest fear. The map that lured her from Gondor was no ancient relic. It was a recent creation, forged by a splinter group within her own order, a faction of purists who believed the current alliance was a dilution of their ancient glory. They sought to use an outsider to bypass the old wards, find the Heartstone, and use its power to crown a new, absolute Underking from a forgotten bloodline they claim to have preserved. They see our hard-won peace as a compromise with lesser beings, Idril explained, her voice like wind through deep caves. They believe only a return to the old monarchy, a single strong hand ruling all under realms, can restore what was lost. Their agent placed that symbol as a declaration of intent. The balance you helped build is their primary target. The revelation was a seismic shift in the conflict. The threat was no longer an external army or a greedy surface lord, but a poison from within their own historical heart. Elara immediately convened the United Council, laying out Idril's testimony. She urged them not with panic, but with sober clarity, to watch for this new, ideological enemy who wore the face of a friend or a scholar, and whose weapon was not a blade, but a seductive, nostalgic lie. This internal division created a vulnerability the purists were eager to exploit. From their shadowy network, they saw Elara not as a bridge, but as the keystone holding the alliance together. Remove her, and the entire structure of trust would likely collapse into suspicion and infighting, creating the perfect chaos for their new king to rise. Their plan was insidious, a campaign to meticulously discredit her influence, painting her as a surface agent whose true goal was to weaken the Underrealms for a future Gondorian takeover. As Elara pored over the mapmaker's true archives, seeking any clue to the purist's identity, a sealed scroll was delivered to her quarters by an unseen hand. It was not written in ink, but in carefully arranged flecks of mica that caught the light. The message was brief, a summons to a forgotten observatory deep in a neutral tunnel, and it was signed with the very symbol she had been hunting, the broken chain. The air in the hidden observatory was thin and cold, tasting of ancient dust and ambition. Elara stood with Kale and Faramir at her back, facing a circle of hooded figures whose faces were carved with the same severe lines as the mountain itself. Their leader, a stern elder named Thorin, presented their solution to the so-called dilution of their bloodlines. A young woman was pushed forward, her eyes wide with a mixture of awe and uncertainty. "This is Lyra," he announced, his voice echoing in the cavernous space. "The last descendant of the Hammer and Moon line, the true heir to the unified throne. Her right is beyond any council's vote." Elara's heart sank. Lyra was not a conspirator, but a pawn, her life shaped by a curated history that omitted the wars and the sacrifices. To denounce the purists outright would be to declare war and shatter the girl, likely driving her straight into their arms. Instead, Elara met Thorin's gaze, her own voice calm but unyielding. "You speak of rights, but you use the methods of the old schism," she stated. "You offer a crown built on forgotten oaths and hidden truths. Would you have your queen rule from a throne of lies?" She She presented the evidence she had gathered from the true mapmaker archives, scrolls that detailed not just the glory of the old kings, but their fatal pride and the catastrophic war that followed. She showed Lyra the broken chain symbol, explaining how it represented not a return to greatness, but a path to repeating the very tragedy that had shattered their world. The purists recoiled, their plan to crown a willing martyr unraveling under the glare of inconvenient history. Thorin's face darkened with fury. "You cling to your fragile peace like a coward," he spat. But stone endures long after treaties turn to dust. We will not be silenced. With that, he and his followers melted back into the shadows, their campaign far from over. Left in the sudden silence, Lyra stood trembling, the foundation of her identity crumbling around her. Elara approached her slowly, not as a rival, but as a guide. "They tried to make you a weapon in a war you never knew existed," she said softly, "but a true ruler needs more than a bloodline. She needs to understand the weight of the crown she might wear." Elara offered her a place within the Guild of the Veiled Stone, not as a figurehead, but as a student. She would teach Lyra the complete, unvarnished history of all three kingdoms, the good and the terrible, so that when the time came, the young woman could make her own choice from a place of knowledge, not manipulation. It was a dangerous gamble, bringing the focal point of a rebellion into the heart of their alliance, but it was the only way to disarm the purist's most powerful symbol by empowering her with truth. As Lyra looked from Elara's earnest face to the vast, star-charted dome of the observatory, her confusion began to harden into a determined curiosity. Lyra's days became a pilgrimage through the living history of the deep earth. She walked the luminous crystal halls of Stonehaven with Morwen, learning how the stability of every arch depended on the precise resonance of its stones. She descended into the geothermal forges of Deeproot with Boren, feeling the raw power of the earth and hearing stories of how that fire had once forged both beautiful tools and terrible weapons. She even stood with Selin on the glowing shores of Glimmer home, watching the silent dance of light in the water and understanding that some truths were too fragile for any single ruler to hold. Elara did not lecture. She provided the evidence and let the kingdoms speak for themselves. Lyra saw the lingering suspicion in a Stonehaven elder's eyes when a Deeproot caravan arrived, and she felt the grudging respect in a Deeproot warrior's nod to a Stonehaven mason repairing a vital bridge. She was not just learning about power, but about the delicate, living tapestry of trust that made their union possible. The old scrolls spoke of kings who commanded obedience, but the world she walked in was built on hard-won cooperation. The choice, when it came, was not a surrender but an awakening. In a quiet moment within the guild hall, Lyra told Elara she would formally renounce any claim to a unified throne. A single crown, no matter how noble the bloodline, was a return to the very structure that had fractured their world. Her purpose, she realized, was not to rule over the three peoples, but to speak for the generation that would inherit the alliance. The purists, however, saw her decision as the ultimate betrayal. Thorin and his followers erupted in a very public outcry, accusing Elara of poisoning the heir's mind with surface world weakness, of twisting history to serve Gondor's subtle conquest. They claimed the scholar had not educated Lyra, but brainwashed her, stealing their kingdom's future. The accusation created a painful rift, turning old friends into wary adversaries and forcing every traditionalist to choose between nostalgic myth and complicated reality. The conflict culminated at a grand assembly of the United Council, a gathering held in the very vault where the Heartstone pulsed. Thorin stood and demanded Lyra be removed from Elara's influence, his voice ringing with outrage. But before the council could descend into argument, Lyra herself stepped forward. She did not shout. She spoke with a clarity that silenced the chamber. "You offer me a crown born from a war we all lost," she said, her gaze sweeping across the purists and the uncertain crowd. "You offer me a throne that would require me to rule over Stonehaven, command Deeproot, and govern Glimmer home. But I have walked their halls. I am not worthy to rule them. I can only hope to be worthy of listening to them." She praised the council, not as a perfect system, but as a living one, a structure that allowed for argument and compromise instead of edicts and rebellion. Her words, heartfelt and grounded in her own journey, did what no political decree could. They swayed the undecided, the citizens who feared change but believed in the young woman's sincerity. The purists found themselves isolated, their support crumbling as the silent majority chose a hopeful, shared future over a glorious, solitary past. With the immediate threat of a coup dissolved, a new stability settled over the Underrealms. Elara, watching the factions slowly begin to reconcile, knew this was the moment to cement their history forever. She turned her attention to the guild's greatest project yet, a definitive chronicle that would trace the complete and unbroken lineage of every Underking, ensuring no splinter group could ever again manipulate a forgotten name for their own ends. The ink was still drying on the pages of the Chronicles of the Depths when its influence began to spread. Elara's masterwork was not a dry academic text, but a living tapestry woven from the archival scrolls of Gondor, the stone-carved sagas of Stonehaven, the fiery epics of Deeproot, and the luminous memory sequences of Glimmer home. She had insisted that scribes from all three kingdoms work side by side in the guild's scriptorium, their hands guiding the pens that told their shared story. The result was a volume where a reader could find the engineering principles of a Stonehaven arch, explained alongside the Deeproot ballads that praised its beauty, creating a dialogue that had been silenced for centuries. Copies were sent to every major library and scholarly institution across Middle-earth, where they quickly became the standard reference, replacing centuries of wild speculation and fearful rumor with documented fact and diverse testimony. This new clarity had a profound effect. In the universities of Gondor, young scholars who had once dreamed of treasure hunting now debated the finer points of subterranean ethics. In a tavern in Rohan, a minstrel learned the true melody of an old Deeproot mining chant and found it resonated perfectly with a surface world ballad of journeying, a connection that brought his audience to a hushed silence. The academic cooperation Elara had envisioned began to flourish, with joint research proposals on geology, botany, and history flowing into the guild from every corner of the known world. It was a validation of her deepest belief that understanding was the strongest foundation for peace. Not every heart, however, was open to this new light. A small but vocal group of hardliners, both on the surface and in the deep places, saw the Chronicle as a dangerous dilution. They attempted to ban its circulation, calling it a work of propaganda that gave the Hidden Kingdoms a legitimacy they should not possess. Their protests, however, were drowned out by a wave of widespread acclaim. The book's own thoroughness was its best defense, its inclusion of every perspective, including the tragic flaws that led to the ancient schism, lending it an undeniable authority. By giving voice to all sides, Elara had created a work that no single faction could fully claim or wholly reject, and in that balance, it found its enduring power. The publication solidified the Hidden Kingdoms not as legend, but as history. They were no longer phantoms in the dark, but sovereign nations with documented lineages, cultural achievements, and a formal place in the intricate tapestry of Middle-earth. This act of remembrance was their greatest protection, a shield against being erased by time or conquest ever again. The knowledge was now woven into the very fabric of the world's memory, a permanent anchor for their future. The celebration of this achievement filled the great hall of the guild in Minas Tirith, where Elara sat at a long table, signing copies for a line of readers that stretched out the door and into the sunlit street. She smiled at a young girl who clutched the heavy book to her chest, as if it were a chest of jewels, and in that moment felt a profound sense of completion. Then, as the line finally dwindled, a stranger in a travel-stained cloak of an unfamiliar, grayish leather approached the table. He placed no book before her, but instead set down a single, smooth disk of obsidian, so dark it seemed to drink the light from the room. Carved into its surface was a symbol she had never seen in all her research, a spiral that resembled a nautilus shell, but fashioned from interlocking chains. Without a word, he turned and disappeared into the crowd, leaving behind the silent token and a question that threatened to rewrite her chronicle all over again. The obsidian disc felt unnaturally cold in Elara's hand, its spiral symbol a silent question mark against all she had accomplished. The stranger led her not to a library or a council chamber, but into the raw, fiery heart of a dormant volcano, where the very air tasted of sulfur and hot metal. This was the domain of the Emberfolk, a people forged in the deep fires, who had sealed their tunnels after the ancient war, choosing absolute isolation over a peace they did not trust. Their city was a marvel of brutalist architecture, with bridges of unsupported magma and dwellings carved directly into the flows of obsidian. The Emberfolk themselves moved with a deliberate, powerful grace, their skin shimmering with heat haze and their eyes holding the glow of the eternal forge. They were the masters of a craft lost to the other kingdoms, the original smiths of the Underkings. Their chieftain, a formidable woman named Raya with hair like flowing basalt, regarded Elara with a gaze that could cool lava. "You bring the dust of the outside world to our threshold, scholar," she stated, her voice a low rumble. "Your chronicle is a pretty story, but stories can be weapons. Why should we trust the words of one who has united our old rivals?" The suspicion was a wall of heat. To earn even a moment of their time, Elara was subjected to their trials. She walked a narrow ledge over a river of magma, the heat blistering, her focus solely on placing one foot before the other in a test of endurance. She sat in a chamber of resonant crystal, identifying the single flawed note in a complex harmonic sequence, a trial of wisdom that required her to listen not with her ears, but with her spirit. Through it all, she never demanded, never insisted on her own importance. When asked what she sought, she offered the only thing she had that they might value, a copy of her chronicle, filled with the histories of their kin they had not seen in an age. It was a gift, given without condition, Her respect for their choice to remain apart, proven through action and not just words, was the key that finally turned. Moved by her integrity, Raya led her to the city's sacred heart, a forge powered by the planet's own core. And there, resting not on a pillow of velvet, but on an anvil of pure adamant, was the original crown of the Underkings. It was not a gaudy thing of jewels, but a circlet of intertwined metals, mithril and iron, and a strange, dark ore that seemed to drink the light, its simplicity speaking of immense, ancient authority. Its existence was both a miracle and a catastrophe waiting to happen. If the purists or any other faction learned that this ultimate symbol of royal power still existed, it would shatter the fragile council and ignite civil wars across the Underrealms. Yet in Raya's reluctant trust, Elara saw an even greater possibility. This was not just a fourth kingdom to add to the ledger. This was the missing piece, the holders of the very source of legitimacy. With the Emberfolk and their crown brought into the alliance, the Union would no longer be a partnership of three, but a complete restoration of the ancient peoples, a unity so profound it might finally silence the ghosts of the schism forever. Raya saw the same potential gleaming in the crown's muted metals. "We have guarded this symbol of a failed age for long enough," she declared, her decision echoing through the silent forge. "I will meet with the leaders of Stonehaven, Deeproot, and Glimmer home. Let us see if the fire of the deep earth can truly temper the alliance into something unbreakable." The Heartstone chamber hummed with a tension that felt both ancient and newborn. For the first time in millennia, the leaders of all four hidden kingdoms stood together before the glowing gem. Morwen of Stonehaven, her hand resting on the cool, familiar crystal beside her. Boren of Deeproot, his palm flat against the warm, resonant root vein. Selin of Glimmer home, her fingers tracing the gentle, watery light. And Raya of the Emberfolk, her touch firm on the stone that pulsed with the planet's deep fire. Elara stood a step apart, a witness from the sunlit world, her breath caught in her throat. One by one, they placed their hands upon the Heartstone itself, and as their skin met its luminous surface, they swore the oath. Not to a king, not to a crown, but to each other. Their voices wove together, a low, resonant chorus that promised mutual aid, shared stewardship, and a future built not on the glory of one, but on the strength of all. The stone, which had known only the discord of the schism, seemed to drink in their unified vow. Its light, which had flared and faltered through conflict, began to shift. The separate hues of crystal, root, sea, and fire did not simply mix. They harmonized, spiraling together into a single, brilliant confluence of pure, white light that pulsed with a steady, unwavering rhythm. It was a light that felt like forgiveness, like a long-held breath finally released. In that silent, radiant moment, centuries of division did not just end. They were erased, rewritten by a shared promise made tangible in the glow. Elara felt the energy wash over her, a wave of profound peace that resonated in her very bones. It was not the end of a journey, but the beginning of a new story for the entire world, one written in a light that would now shine, undimmed, from the heart of the mountain. The path back to the guild felt both familiar and utterly transformed. Elara walked through its halls no longer as a renegade scholar, but as a living link between worlds. Her office, once cluttered with the frantic notes of a solitary quest, now held gifts from 4 kingdoms, a quiet museum of trust built in the deep dark. From her window, she could watch a Stonehaven mason advise a Gondorian architect on reinforcing a city wall, while a Deeproot botanist demonstrated fungal cultivation techniques to surface farmers. The hidden kingdoms did not just survive, they flourished, their unique strengths weaving into the fabric of the wider world, creating a tapestry of cooperation richer than any of them could have achieved alone. Their forgotten lineages were no longer secrets to be hoarded or weapons to be wielded, but stories to be shared, studied, and honored in the guild's great library, and in the songs sung by firesides both above and below. Elara often found herself pausing before the simple river stone from Morwen and the obsidian shard from Boren, their quiet presence on her desk, a daily reminder of how far they had all come. Her journey had begun with a cryptic map and a hunger for knowledge, but it had ended by building a bridge, not just of stone and diplomacy, but of understanding. She knew, with a certainty that settled deep in her bones, that challenges would always arise, new shadows would gather, and old prejudices would occasionally stir. Yet the foundation was now unshakable, a covenant sworn not on a crown, but on a shared commitment to stewardship, a promise etched not just in scrolls, but in the very pulse of the Heartstone itself. It was a legacy that would endure, guarded by the hands of many, for generations yet to come.